It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Wednesday, May 10th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is asking the question to trade or not to trade.
I'm not going to answer it.
You're going to answer on the show,
Well,
though.
maybe on the show. You have to tune in.
Yes, absolutely. We're going to go through and see who we might trade on the Flyers, plus get to your mailbag questions all on today's show.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who is on Twitter at Sportsology. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. You can subscribe to the show or follow us for free over on YouTube. We're now in the Sirius XM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. You'll get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Before we dig into the meat of today's episode, just a little bit of trivia left over from the draft lottery. It appears that the Flyers just weren't even close in terms of the numbers. We found out that in the first draw, when they get the first three numbers, the Flyers were already out at that point. So,
I mean, do we
uh,
expect anything else? I mean, I know
no,
there's always hope, but the
yeah,
expectation was it wasn't going to happen.
yeah, no, that's true. That is true. And like I said on yesterday's show, I'm just happy they didn't move down. So
Right.
I will take it.
That was a key.
Yep, absolutely. Uh, Looking a little bit at men's worlds, the news continues as the tournament is about to get underway. There were no additional current Phantoms or Flyers added to any rosters, but old friend Oliver Lordson is on Team Denmark once again.
He's just penciled in. Like, who else are they going to get?
Well, I think he has a brother on the team too.
There you go.
Um, And on Team Czechia, our old friend Lucas Sedlak, who was with us for a brief
Lucas
period.
still playing hockey.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then in a pre-tournament game, Ronnie Attard scored a goal for Team USA against Germany.
Yeah, first goal was nice shot. Lots of room to shoot. Lots.
Yeah. And in the meantime, Scott Lawton was added to the leadership group for Team Canada. He'll have an A on his jersey. And I think, the timing of that, along with finding out he got the Flyers nomination for the King Clancy Trophy, was appropriate. He is a leader in this team. As we said throughout the season, he's the only Flyer to wear an A on his sweater without a captain this year. And he really has been a leader on and off the ice, been heavily involved in the Flyers community outreach efforts in so many different ways. And I think it's well deserved.
But he won't be captain next year, Rachel. He just won't be.
That's okay.
I don't know if it's okay. He probably should be. Now, all those things are true. And when things
Yeah.
were spiraling out of control with the Ivan Provorov situation, he really took the reins, and it was
Yeah.
great. And so good for him. Nice thing to see, but he should be captain.
Yeah. I think he eventually will be. And I think it'll be the right decision. Another just small bit of Flyers prospect news. We've been following the junior playoffs, and in the OHL, the Peterborough Petes are in the championship for the OHL. They will be facing the London Knights, and they defeated the North Bay Battalion in 7 games, a very exciting series. In that game 7, J.R. Avon was the first star of the game. He scored the game-winning goal. He also had a couple penalties in the game, but
No, all
when you
right.
score the game-winning goal, all of that goes out the
Right.
window. As
Yeah, he's
far
having
as
a really good year.
yeah,
Nice to see it. So is Zanetti. Nice to
yeah,
see both those guys advance. It's good.
Yeah, Brian Zanetti was the second star of that game, having 2 assists in there as well. So Flyers prospects making an impact in the OHL playoffs. Hopefully, they'll make it to the Memorial Cup.
Yeah, it would be nice. I mean, I've covered some Memorial Cups. They're fun.
Turning to our to trade or not to trade, that is the question. In our kind of previous episode where we've kicked off discussing off-season trades, last Friday we discussed Ivan Provorov, Travis Konechny, and Kevin Hayes as far as being more likely at or top trade targets for the Flyers in terms of let's see what's out there, let's see what we can get for them. So if you want to dig into what we thought about trading them as a possibility, go back and listen to last Friday's episode. It was a really good in-depth conversation
It was.
there. Looking at the rest of the roster, I think, when you're considering who to trade, first off, they already have to be under contract for next year. He obviously can't trade anybody you don't have signed. So some guys we may not be talking about simply for that fact. And now if they re-sign them and then do a sign and trade, that's a whole other discussion. But for the purposes of this conversation, we're going to talk about guys who are already under contract for next season. And then, what's the purpose of the trade? Are we trying to clear cap space? Are we trying to sell high to, spark this rebuild and create some space for it and build assets? And then also, why are we even why are we making the trade at all? And how does this fit into the rebuild plan moving forward?
Well, all right. So first thing off is to answer the question, why make the trade? Now, I am not in favor, and I'm not saying this won't happen and they won't do it, but I'm no longer in favor of making trades just to get rid of cap space. To me, it does me no good. I still have to worry about that money being on my cap, whatever I'm retaining from those trades. If I'm just dumping a guy, I'm definitely not giving him a pick, and I'm certainly not taking a trade where I'm not getting much in return. It just doesn't make sense for a true rebuilding team to do that. Now, again, I don't really know if the Flyers are a true rebuilding team. We're going to find that out. But so, like as an example, like Joel Farabee, there's no reason to trade. You wouldn't even talk about it. He's young. He's not in the lexicon of doing that. Now, if you wanted to trade Nick Delorier, should there be a market? Yeah, you jump at it. Would Coach Tortorella trade Nick Delorier? Not on your life. And so that's where you start now to have the issues of, okay, are we rebuilding here or are we rebuilding to a point, but you still want your guys too? And that's where I have trouble.
Well, I think, there's that way to approach it in terms of looking at Tortorella specifically. But if you look at, a rebuild that could take 3 to 5 years, right? And potentially even more, how many coaches outlast that kind of a time frame? And so I think you have to be thinking beyond John Tortorella, honestly, and look at a cohesive team that's going to get you where you want to be. Now, in the short term, you have to consider those things, right? And so I think that everything has to be on the table, whether it's Torts' guy or not. And, we do have that question as to whether or not that's something Danny Briere is going to be willing to do. I would lean no, but at the same time, there's also a purpose to having some of these guys around as placeholders, right? Until you can actually make the moves to fill in the spots that need to be filled in to supplement whatever drafting you're doing.
All right, so tell me the wisdom of having Nick Delorier till 2025, 26.
There's none. There's
There's not.
absolutely none. But that was not a Danny Briere deal. And
No,
so
I get it, but he's going to have
and
to
that's
figure out.
why he's somebody that you just I'm
He's,
not saying, you know, take nothing for him. As you said, it's important to get something in return.
yes.
But I think, in terms of the forwards that are on the table, in terms of can be traded, Joel Farabee, Nick Delorier, and Scott Lawton, you can trade those guys.
hmm Yeah, I mean, again, if I'm trading Nick Delorier, you offer me a sixth or a seventh, I'll take it. And I know I'm going to lose out in the short term on the penalty kill. I get it, but I don't want him on the team. And he's a great guy. Don't get me wrong. It has
Hmm.
nothing to do with anything other than his skating, what he's going to do on the team, and how he's going to look when he's 35. and that's I don't need him there for that. So whatever I can get, I will take for Nick Delorier, but I'm not paying to get rid of him, and
No.
I'm not paying any retention. But I am trying to shop him
Yeah, I
because
think absolutely, 'cause that's why everything should be on the table. And even looking, I mean, I personally would not trade Scott Laughton or Joel Farabee. Should the discussion happen? Absolutely.
no, the discussion should happen. When you look at Lawton, 4 more years, so he'd be 31, 32, like in that range. It's on the edge. So I have to see what I can get. I'm going to look at it now because his points will never get any higher. So that's fine. You do need a captain on,
Very affordable at 3 million.
yes, but you do need a captain on a team that could lead some of the young guys, which will make me lean towards keeping him. But I'm willing to talk about it. That's fine. Um, Most likely, they're not going to trade him, and most likely, again, the coach is going to sit down with the GM and say, "You're not trading him."
Yeah, I just think, from our perspective, doesn't matter what uh John Tortorella thinks, right?
No,
This is
I
would
get it
we
from
trade
a
him?
conversational standpoint, sure, but in reality, I kind of have to attach it to reality sometimes.
I get it. All right, we're going to continue that discussion. We're going to add in the defenseman to the conversation and to trade or not to trade. More of that coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. There's no I in team, but there's one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform you need to build yours. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed's a powerful hiring platform that help you do it all. We streamline hiring with powerful tools that find you matched candidates. With Instant Match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job, according to Indeed Data US. One of the things I love about Indeed is that it makes hiring all in one place so easy. They show you candidates whose resumes on Indeed fit your description immediately after you post so you could hire faster. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at indeed.com/lockedon. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
All right, so getting back into our conversation on to trade or not to trade. I think, again, with the forwards, we obviously have a couple of them that are not tradable. You know, Sean Couturier is not tradable because he has a no move as part of his contract anyway, but Cam Atkinson is also not tradable, so we can't really talk about that. And so there really are a limited number of forwards on the
Mhm.
table to potentially trade. And that's why I think, you really have to seriously look at Delorier, Lawton, and Farabee and see, what you could get in return.
Well, I mean, Connectly's tradable. I mean, he
Yeah,
is.
right. Other than who we talked about last week.
I just want to point that out for somebody
Yeah,
who might tweet that to us. Yes, I agree with you. Now on the defensive front, there are
right.
some tradable guys, but with caveats.
So Rasmus Ristolainen, I think, obviously, again, I don't think anybody really agreed with the deal that he got. Mostly the term, more
Who's the
than
term?
anything. But 5.1, he signed through 26, 27. So it's like 4 more years at that level. And while he did improve tremendously over the course of the season, I don't know that he still is worth 5.1 million and for that term. Um, but I do think, again, given everything and given some of the defenders we have, coming up in the depth, I think you certainly have to consider it.
You have to consider it. I have to consider it. I don't think the figure is the matter. I think it's the term. So,
Yeah.
unfortunately, just like if you are a Republican and you didn't want to hear them say 4 more years for Joe Biden, then you would feel the same way about Rasmus Ristolainen because it's going to be at least 3 more years because of that term, nobody's touching it.
Yeah, I think so too. Travis Sanheim, I think, is a more interesting discussion to have again because his salary jumped up starting this upcoming season. He's got a little bit of term, and I think that again he was kind of lost in the shuffle in the defenseman this season, but he is signed until the end of 2031, which just yeah, I don't know if somebody wants to take that on.
Nobody.
6.25.
The only team that looked like they might would be Edmonton last year. Now I don't think there's one that exists right now. Maybe halfway during his contract there'll be an expansion draft, and there'll be a new team in the league, and that's how it'll go down. But people didn't like. They answered me on Twitter about what I had said about Sanheim, but I'm disappointed. I'm sorry. His offense was disappointing. His defense was okay, but he just didn't exert himself offensively. And then when he was on the power play, he looked like he was lost. So this was not a good year for him, and now he's got a no move. He's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely the case. Again, you gotta put it out there, but
Sure.
I don't know. I don't think anything is gonna come of it. The next guy on the list, Tony DeAngelo, 100%. You try and trade him.
Yes, you're definitely trying to trade him. Uh, obviously he's only got one more year. So if you shave a little bit off of that, you might get a taker. There might be like two teams that are interested in DeAngelo. So you're going to mitigate your return. Just try and get some draft picks, something. This is the one spot where it's like, all right, so if I trade DeAngelo, I can plug in Zamula or Adard and I'm fine. Like it's just not going to matter. But at least I'll I'll have a younger player in that spot to help develop, and you get rid of Tony and he gets another fresh start somewhere, and maybe that's good for him. There is like a 55% chance that could happen.
Yeah, I certainly think it's one of the more likely scenarios on the table, and I think it's okay to eat a little bit of salary to get rid of him.
Yeah.
I not a lot, but
No, because I'm hoping to get at least a third round pick out of it. That's why I'll do it.
yeah, yeah, exactly. The next guy on the list I think would be an interesting trade option is Nick Seeler. And he's got one more year on his deal, but he's super cheap, right?
Yeah.
So, and, you know, obviously John Tortorella loves him. And he had a real solid season. And, people did notice his play. And so I think that given how inexpensive his contract is, and what a valuable depth defenseman he could be for any team. I mean, you could get a decent pick in return for him.
Yeah. Nobody's trading though for Nick Seeler with the hopes he's going to make it in their top pairing, their second pairing, or even the third pairing.
No,
They're doing it for what
no.
you said, for the depth thing. So it is going to mitigate the return a little bit, but he's one of the best guys out there for that kind of salary. So for him, I'm looking for a prospect. And I'm looking for a prospect, give me one of your prospects that you don't think you could sign that has some talent, and we'll take them. And that's good. And we're not doing a favor like Brendan Lemieux. It's not like that. But give me one that's got a little term that,
Yep.
has another year or two that we could look at. And if we like him, then we could worry about picking up his RFA contract, that kind of player. And there's teams that are going to have cap crunches coming out of training camp that you could do that with last minute. And so that's what I would do. That's
Yeah.
he's the most tradable of all of them.
Yeah, and I think kind of it's an underappreciated kind of trade as well in terms of picking up, either maybe a fourth round pick or a prospect like that you just
Yeah.
talked about.
I would rather
Um
get the prospect here than the pick, simply
mhm.
because the role that he played and the role that he'll play for another team will really kind of make them feel good about where their playoff positioning is and their depth. So I hope that I can get a little better than what I could draft in the fourth round, and that have that player be a year or two away, or even NHL ready, and they're just not sure if they're going to pick him up on his last year of an RFA or something. So I really do want a little more for Sealer based on how cheap he is, but he can perform to a degree.
Yep, I think so too. All right, and then the other thing I'm wondering on the defensive side of things, can we trade the Ryan Ellis contract, and should we?
Well, I mean, you should if someone will take it, but the thing is, he has 3 more years on it. Actually, one, two, three, 4 more. I don't think anybody's taken it with 4 more years. Usually they take it the last year, or sometimes two. 4, I don't think you have any shot.
Yeah, that is absolutely
He's
fair.
going to
We'll
be a
probably,
Flyer for a long time, Rach.
yeah, a little LTIR action for for him. All right, and then with goaltending, I think it's been pretty clear. Obviously, Carter Hart could be traded, but I certainly would not do that. But would trade Felix Sandstrom, who has 1 year left on his deal.
Yeah, certainly if somebody comes calling for Sandstrom, you take whatever they offer, because that's an area where you do have some depth, and you definitely would be interested in that. Um, as far as Hart, the only reason I would trade him is if we had a discussion over the summer and either he gave me a definitive, I'm going to test free agency, or he's like lukewarm about things and say, I love it here, but once the but happens, then I might think otherwise. Plus, I have to also wait on the Hockey Canada stuff.
Yep, that is true. We do not have a timeline to find out that for sure yet either. But in the meantime, we will be getting to your mailbag questions coming up next. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. My favorite part of the Game Time app is that it's great for getting notified about those last minute tickets and flash deals. Plus, they give you the views from your seats, which is so important for me. The Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Also, they'll send the tickets directly to your phone so you don't have to dig through email. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, digging into our listener/viewer mailbag. Michael over on YouTube wants to know, speaking of the draft, do you think it was the Flyers best interest to make that Lindros trade they did instead of getting those other guys like Forsberg? I know Lindros was supposed to be the next big thing and probably got the Flyers the new arena, but I wanted to hear from somebody who lived it and experienced it. I don't know
Well,
if he's calling us old, but
in a way he is, but not in a bad way.
no,
We
I
did,
know,
we did live through it, and
we did.
even though in the long run it didn't work out for the Flyers, they did have to make that trade. They did need a new arena. That was desperate. I'm not sure what would have happened to the Flyers if all of that didn't happen. And it took a big personality like Lindros to get the new arena. So I feel like they had to do it.
I think so too, and I think that you know again, it's hard to say. You look at what happened with Nolan Patrick, right? And all those concussions. You had some injury and concussion issues with Lindros as well. And I do think that team was so good.
It was.
And Lindros was such a huge part of it. And I think that um uh, there was potential there, even trading away all those guys and Forsberg, the potential was still really there, and they put a good team together around him.
Hmm.
And were it for those concussions, I think, and Scott Stevens, like I will never forget that man's name as long as I live, Scott
Yeah, he
Stevens.
would have been an all-time player. There's no
Yeah,
question.
yeah, and so I think, I still think it was the right move
Yep.
when all was said and done. Another YouTube-based question. Based on what we know now, who currently on the Flyers would make a good line mate for Cutter Gauthier?
I think Joel Farabee, and this is whether Gauthier plays wing or center. Right now in the World Championships, he's playing on the wing. Um, Farabee is that kind of guy where he can create as well as shoot, and Gauthier is similar, so it would create a little extra deception having those two guys on the same line because you don't really know if they're going to pass or shoot. They both skate really well. I feel like each of them play a very similar game.
Yeah, I think so too. And I was going back and forth in my head about this. Is Cutter Gauthier the kind of guy that would benefit from having Owen Tippett on the same line? And I don't know that that would be
Yeah, I'm not sure.
a good combination, but I think Farabee is the right guy because I think both of them are flexible in terms of how
Yeah,
they can style their game. And so if one of them is skating up, the other one can hold back and
yeah,
vice versa. And I think they would complement each other really well.
me too.
They both would get back defensively, I think, as well, which is would be a huge part of being successful in a John Tortorella regime.
Yeah.
So I think you're right there. Next question. What would it take for any team to trade into the second round this year? And do the Flyers have the assets to do it?
Well, I mean, first thing it would take is a willing partner that has multiple second rounders. So, in other words, if a team has one or two first rounders, like the Canadians, and by the time the second round goes around, they've got three guys off the board. Maybe they're willing to trade with you because there's nobody else in this round that's necessarily floating their boat. And if you want to give me a pick for next year's draft, maybe I'll do that. So, could you sacrifice? And I think the Flyers have a second for next year. So, could you trade one of your extra thirds this year and a second for next year to get in a third this year? Yeah, maybe towards the bottom of the round, but that only happens if teams have kind of decided that they can still get the player they want in the next round. So most likely, if it's not going to be that, and again, that what I just offered is really at like the last two or three picks of the second round, like nowhere near the first 10 or 12,
Mhm.
which are still really premium picks. You want to get into that area, maybe Ivan Provorov gets you there, but that's still a maybe. They may not even do it for this year. They might give you a second and a prospect for next year. So I don't think they have much of a guarantee to get into that 10 or 15 picks in the second round. Sorry.
Yeah, I honestly think the cost is too high, and it would be worth it, if you're trading a guy like Provorov and you or Konechny and a second is going to be part of the return. You almost just say, yeah, we'll take next year's because you can get a much higher pick, even though the depth isn't quite as significant in that draft. I still think you could get a better quality player in next year's draft for the plus some other return, right?
Right.
It would be that second plus other things, whereas in this year's draft, it would just be that pick, which
Right.
is not enough return.
Right.
All right, last question for this week. Could the Flyers make a move in free agency more than backfilling if they clear the cap space?
So, like we keep hearing about the Kevin Hayes thing. So let's say they're willing and able to trade Kevin Hayes. So let's say they do have a couple million on the cap for the next few years, 2 or 3 years. Um, who are you getting for that extra money? Like that's my whole thing is okay. You got rid of Kevin Hayes, fine. It would be easier to trade Kevin Hayes if he only had 2 years left. So if you had him on the team this year, how badly is it going to hurt your team? It's not really going to hurt your team. He's not bad in the room. He's not always going to give the effort you want, and sometimes he's going to annoy the coach. Now, if the coach says, "I don't want him on the team," then you got a problem because now I have to look, and I still want to gain something from this. But again, the Flyers can't be in the spot where they're looking to gain cap space, but saying they're a rebuilding team, but then really looking out on the free agent market too. Because the backfilling is one thing. If there's going to be like some 1 year players, that's fine. But they could do that now without trading Kevin Hayes. So to me, it's like if they're trading Hayes and they want this cap space back, even though there's going to be a penalty every year of a couple $1,000,000 for as long as you've decided you'll retain, that's a different situation. Like I'm not willing to
Yeah.
do that. I'm just not. Now, if I wait until next year, and then next year at the deadline, when there's only a year and a half left of Kevin Hayes, that return's going to be a lot better. So if I'm, Danny Briere, I'm like, John, just just cool it. You got to get through this season with Kevin. Just do what you can with him. We're not really going anywhere. You know that. I know that. But we can get a better return next year, I feel. So let's do the best thing for the team. I feel like that's the best thing.
Yeah, I think so too. In terms of Kevin Hayes, I do think that this year's free agency is going to be backfilling, but they may end up like with Kevin Hayes, keeping a couple of guys you wouldn't expect them to, just because it's kind of a the devil in this situation, and b like it's going to be tough for the Flyers to attract a kind of free agent that's going to be better than who you already have. And so you might as well wait a year before you start trying to move things up a notch. I think that makes perfect sense. All right, that will do it for today's show. Every day, listeners, tomorrow on the show, we are going to dig more into the upcoming draft. Now that we know where the Flyers are picking, we're going to just talk more about the guys we've already profiled so far, who we're going to revisit, and then we'll do a deep dive into Edward Chalet, who is, I think, making a little bit of noise in this year's rankings. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. Send in your mailbag questions via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com, or you can comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great day, everyone.